Hello, everybody. So this is the first video lecture of the quarter. Welcome back. Um, so we're going to tackle intelligence. There's a lot to it, but we're just going to take a few days to mull it over. So for tonight's homework, your job is to watch this video and also to complete this worksheet that I should have handed you in class. So these are also the names of the sections in the book, in the module. Here are the corresponding page numbers. So if you want to go over in the book yourself, feel free to do so if that works better for you. If you're fine just taking notes from this particular lecture, that's just fine. Just make sure you write the notes in here for the subsequent categories, and I'll let you know when the questions change. So let's get into the lecture. Oh, not that one, that one. Okay, so we should have talked about intelligence in class, about what makes someone intelligent, what are some characteristics. Let's dive right into the definition of it for our first section. So we're going to be doing the first three of these questions. We'll be getting to these other four questions tomorrow, just to let you know. So intelligence can be defined as the ability to learn from one's experiences, acquire knowledge, and use resources effectively in adapting to new situations or solving problems. Now, this might not be the definition you're thinking of when you think of intelligence, because a lot of people think of people who get great grades or that work in a research hospital working on the cure for cancer or for AIDS, when in fact the very difficult task as a psychologist is that you have to create a definition that is universally true all over the world. And as far as we can tell, this is a definition of intelligence that is true anywhere. You need to be able to learn from your own experiences. That requires memory. You need to acquire knowledge. Again, memory, and use resources effectively in adapting to new situations or solving problems. So again, intelligence is very much linked to memory and thinking, and putting those two together. Also, there's elements of insight where you just randomly get ideas without having to think too much. These ideas just come to you. There are many elusive elements of intelligence, and how different cultures define intelligence is fine and dandy, but if we are going to be objective about it, we need a definition that works universally. So again, this is very important. We're going to come back to this when we talk about people with intellectual disabilities or who are gifted or geniuses. Again, the ability to learn from your experiences, to acquire knowledge, and to adapt to new situations or solving problems. So let's move on to theories. And there's at least 4 theories of intelligence right now. This one's a bit of an older one. I'm not sure anyone really believes in this anymore, but this came about in the early 1900s, about 1904 or so. So Spearman believed that there was what's called a G factor and an S factor. Now, G factor means general intelligence, your general ability to reason and solve. Are you more or less a reasonable, logical human being? S factor is the ability to excel in certain areas or specific intelligence. So, for example, you may be very good at playing chess, but you're not very good at playing golf. Specific to a particular ability or a particular activity. Now, a lot of critics say that this is a overly simplified view of intelligence, and that this can really mean anything. So it really means nothing. But better theories came along. So there's what's called the triarchic theory of intelligence. This was come up by Bob Sternberg in the 1980s and 1990s. And according to his theory, there are 3 kinds of intelligence. We have analytical, creative, and practical intelligence. Now, analytical intelligence is the ability to break problems down into component parts, or analysis, in other words, problem solving. Also, Creative intelligence, the ability to deal with new and different concepts and to come up with new ways of solving problems. We live in a changing world and we are presented with new problems all the time. So um, we have a certain capacity to deal with change. That doesn't necessarily mean everyone's great at it, but everyone has some sort of ability to change as life changes. There's also practical intelligence. Now, whereas analytical intelligence, we might call that book smarts or academically smart, practical intelligence would be street smarts. So the ability to use information to get along in life and become successful. So these are almost kind of antithetical. It's been found that people that have high analytical intelligence are, very academically successful, but they're not very practically intelligent. They just don't know how to create their ideas. They just don't know how to carry out those ideas. And people who have practical intelligence aren't necessarily very good at breaking a problem down into its little parts and figuring out why it works. But to some degree, people have all of these abilities. There's also Howard Gardner in the 1990s came up with this theory of multiple intelligences. Some could argue that there are hundreds of different types of intelligences, but for the purpose of this lecture, he came up with about 12. Let's see if I'm right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, I was off by 3. So Howard Gardner believes that there are many different types of intelligence, even more so than analytical, practical, or creative. So, for example, there are clearly people who are very musically talented, but not very good at math, or very good at video games, but not very good at sports. So you have a whole host of intelligences. One big criticism of this particular view is that these are abilities, not necessarily intelligences. So people are looking at it as, looking at ingredients in a recipe. That intelligence is a culmination of all these things. And Howard Gardner is simply separating the ingredients into its basic parts. Now, whether that's true or not, that's up to philosophical debate, but these are the theories. Lastly, there is emotional intelligence, the awareness of and ability to manage one's own emotions, as well as the ability to be self-motivated, able to feel what others feel, and socially skilled. Now, studies have shown, not consistently, but some studies have shown that people with greater emotional intelligence are generally more successful in their personal life, in their professional life. This is not certainly universally true, but this is a highly contested theory. And I may remind all of you that intelligence is something that you can get better at. You can get better at solving problems. You can get better at adapting and being flexible. And you can be better at remembering experiences and acquiring knowledge. So if you feel you're not very emotionally intelligent or musically intelligent like myself, you always have an innate ability to increase your intelligence. Now let's move on to intellectual disability and giftedness. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because I don't want to emphasize it too much. But when we're talking about intelligence, there's a need to say what is normal intelligence, who is very intelligent, who is less intelligent, what's the average amount of intelligence. That goes with anything. What's average memory? What's the average number of friends that people have? People want to know what's the average, what's normal. So standardization can tell us what's normal. And the mean is the average score. So if you give an intelligence test, the mean is the average score. So typically in a intelligence test, for example, the Wechsler IQ score, the average score tends to be 100. That's average intelligence on an IQ test. Now, on this bell curve, you'll notice that people can get scores high and low in terms of intelligence, and that most people are in the middle between 85 and 115, as well as 70 and 130. Now, everything between 70 and 130, that's about average intelligence. You may be below average or above average, but you're generally equally intelligent. It's when you get to what's called 2 standard deviations or beyond is when you have people that are um, severely intellectually disabled or very gifted or even a genius. So standard deviation basically means how different the scores are, the average difference between scores of everyone who's taken a test. So for IQ test, the average standard deviation is 15 points, 85 to 115. So anyone who's below 70 is considered intellectually disabled, and anyone above 130 is generally considered gifted. And far beyond that, many, many deviations away, genius. So, for example, Einstein was said to have an IQ score of 250. That's about 9 standard deviations away from normal intelligence. Um, Now, focusing very quickly on developmentally delayed, we define it as people who have behavioral or cognitive skills from an early developmental stage. We could say that's childish, and that would conjure up some bad connotations. But in general, um, people are developmentally delayed. They're sort of behind. So they're stuck in, for example, 6th grade level of intelligence. And also they have particular problems adapting to changes. So as we can see by this chart here, I don't want you to focus on the numbers or the classification, but the basic idea is that people have what's called adaptive limitations. Their intellectual abilities are limited to a particular age group, and there's only so many things they can do for themselves. And down here at the bottom at profound intellectual disability, we have people who have very limited self-care that need constant attention and very limited ability to learn. There are generally a lot of causes for this. So this can be caused environmentally. So for example, if you're not intellectually stimulated at a very young age during infancy or toddler ages, or if you're exposed to pollutants or chemicals, if you live near a freeway or a factory. Also genetic causes like fetal alcohol syndrome and Down syndrome. Those are genetic causes. Moving on to giftedness. So the upper 2% of the population that falls under the upper end of the normal curve. So IQ score of 130 or above. Now, generally, people have these connotations of gifted children or gifted adults or geniuses as being these quirky, nutty, strange people. But in general, studies have found, like Terman's, that they're pretty average and normal, except for their intelligent ability to solve problems and adapt to change. Um, and I skipped one slide. And what's generally true is that um, people who are geniuses are not sort of innate or talented, and that their genius level is unquestioned. So even their conditions as an adult may affect their genius status or their gifted status. They may become less gifted over time if they have a very poor environment. So that's the lecture I have for you. Fill out the homework like we mentioned, and I'll see you